Chuck Norris walked into his first martial arts class as a broke, directionless Air Force serviceman stationed in Korea. He walked out years later as a 7-time undefeated world karate champion, a Hollywood action legend, and the owner of a physique so conditioned it looked like it was engineered in a laboratory rather than built in a gym. And here's what nobody talks about. He did it without the resources most people assume. No fancy training facility, no sports science team, no million-dollar contract fueling his preparation, just an iron will, a martial arts philosophy that treated the body like a weapon, and the most disciplined daily routine in the history of combat sports. And this is my honest opinion. Chuck Norris had the ultimate combination in athletic history. He wasn't just a karate champion. He wasn't just a fit guy. He was both, simultaneously, at the highest level either pursuit has ever produced. His training philosophy was so ahead of its time that fighters today, MMA champions, special forces operators, elite boxers, are still using versions of what Chuck was doing in the 1960s. The workout built the champion proved the workout. There is no better real-world case study for what disciplined physical training can produce in a human being. From 1964 to 1974, Chuck Norris was effectively untouchable in competitive karate. The world of martial arts had never seen anyone combine his level of technical precision with his raw physical conditioning. He retired from competition undefeated across multiple disciplines and went on to train some of the greatest fighters in American martial arts history. So what did he actually do? What was in the daily routine that built that legendary physique and that unbeatable competitive record? Here is exactly what Chuck Norris did every single day for years straight. And when I tell you this, you are not going to believe it. Every morning, before the sun was fully up, Chuck was already moving, not stretching gently, not easing into the day with a light jog, moving. His morning started with a run, not because he was told to, but because he understood something most people never figure out. Cardio isn't just about your lungs, it is about your mental discipline, the ability to do something hard before your brain is fully awake enough to talk you out of it. He ran every single morning, rain or shine, building the aerobic base that would allow him to sustain explosive output in competition round after round without fading. While his opponents were still sleeping, Chuck Norris had already done more work than most people do in an entire day. But the run was just the ignition. What actually built the Chuck Norris physique happened in training sessions that most modern gym-goers would quit within 20 minutes. Because Chuck didn't train like a bodybuilder. He didn't train like a powerlifter. He trained like a weapon being sharpened. Every session had a purpose. Every drill had an application. Every rep was connected to a real-world outcome. The ability to generate maximum force, maximum speed, and maximum endurance in a competitive fight. Nothing was decorative. Nothing was done for show. Everything served the mission. Now here is where it gets interesting. Because most people who know the name Chuck Norris think of the movies. They think of the memes. They think of Walker, Texas Ranger. What they don't think about is that Chuck Norris was a legitimate, verified, decorated martial arts champion before a single camera ever pointed at him. He held black belts in Tang Soo Do, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Judo. He was a 6th-degree black belt in Tang Soo Do, a 9th-degree black belt in his own system, Chun Kuk Do, which he founded himself. And he earned every single one of those belts through daily, grueling, relentless training that started when most young men his age were doing nothing harder than holding a beer. So what did the training actually look like? Here's the breakdown. Chuck Norris built his conditioning around 5 foundational pillars: striking, kicking, grappling, strength, and flexibility. He worked all 5 every single day in a system so comprehensive and so balanced that his body developed capabilities in every direction simultaneously. He wasn't strong but slow. He wasn't fast but weak. He was everything at once, and that combination was what made him genuinely unbeatable. The striking work came first. Chuck would spend the early part of every training session on pure technique. Thousands of punches thrown at a bag, at pads, or into air, each one executed with the intention of making the next one faster and more precise than the last. He was a firm believer in the idea that technique without repetition is theory, and repetition without technique is injury. So every strike was deliberate. Every combination was practiced until it became unconscious. He talked about drilling combinations until his body executed them without his brain's involvement, until muscle memory took over completely and the movement happened before the thought. Then came the kicking, And this is where Chuck Norris separated himself from virtually every other martial artist of his era. His kicks were so technically refined, so explosively powerful, and so precisely targeted that they were studied and copied by competitors for decades after he retired. The roundhouse kick specifically became his signature, a weapon so well developed and so reliably devastating that opponents knew it was coming and still couldn't stop it. He achieved that level of proficiency through one method and one method only: volume. Thousands of kicks thrown per session, tens of thousands per month. His hips, his core, his supporting leg, his striking leg, all of it conditioned to a level that most people will never approach because most people are not willing to do what it takes. Here's where the deck of cards idea becomes relevant. Not cards specifically, but the principle behind it. Chuck Norris understood that the mind is the biggest obstacle in high-volume training. When you're doing your 500th kick of a session, your brain starts negotiating. It tells you that you've done enough. It tells you that the last 100 weren't that important. It tells you to stop. Chuck's solution was the same solution that every elite training mind has independently arrived at. Systematize the volume so the brain isn't involved in the counting. His circuits were structured. His rounds were timed. His sets were predetermined. He didn't decide in the moment how much to do. He decided before the session, wrote it down, and then executed without debate. The plan was made before the fatigue set in. By the time he was tired enough to want to quit, the decision had already been made. His strength training was pure functional power work. Unlike the bodybuilders of his era who were chasing size, Chuck was chasing output. He wanted stronger kicks, not bigger legs. He wanted more explosive punches, not a wider chest. So his strength work reflected that. Push-ups were a staple, not sets of 10 done lazily, but high-volume sets executed with perfect form, building the chest, shoulder, and tricep strength that transferred directly into his striking power. He was reportedly doing 200 to 300 push-ups daily at his peak, not in one set, spread across the day, done in circuits, accumulated in the way that serious training volume always accumulates, a little at a time, consistently, until the total is extraordinary. Pull-ups, dips, core work so intense and so regular that his midsection became one of the most physically impressive in the history of martial arts. Not because he was trying to look good, but because a strong core is the engine of every kick, every punch, every throw, every grappling exchange. You cannot generate real force without it. He knew that. He trained accordingly. The flexibility work is something modern athletes still underestimate, and Chuck Norris was doing it correctly 50 years ago. He stretched every single day, not a cursory 5 minutes at the end of a session, but dedicated, extended flexibility training that maintained his ability to execute high kicks, deep stances, and full-range grappling movements without restriction. His splits were legendary. His hip flexibility was the kind of thing that coaches point at today when they try to explain to students what years of consistent stretching actually produces. He stretched in the morning, he stretched between sessions, he stretched at night, every day, without exception, because he understood that a muscle that can't move through its full range is a muscle that can't generate maximum power, and a fighter who can't move freely is a fighter with a ceiling on what he can achieve. Now, add all of that together. Daily running, thousands of strikes, thousands of kicks, 200 to 300 push-ups, pull-ups and dips, core circuits, daily flexibility work, and then, on top of all of it, full contact sparring with partners who were themselves elite-level martial artists. Because Chuck Norris didn't just train alone, he trained with the best people available. He believed, as all the great fighters have believed, that you become a product of who you train against. If you spar with average people, you develop average responses. If you spar with exceptional people, your nervous system is forced to develop exceptional responses just to survive. So he surrounded himself with the best, and then he pushed them, and they pushed back, and the result was a competitive readiness that no amount of solo training could have produced. By the end of the day, the volume Chuck Norris had accumulated across the run, the technique work, the striking circuits, the strength training, the sparring, and the flexibility sessions was extraordinary. Not superhuman, not impossible, but absolutely extraordinary by any standard measurement. And he did it not for 1 week or one training camp. He did it as a way of life, for years, for decades. The discipline wasn't a phase, it was an identity. Now here's something most people completely skip over when they talk about Chuck Norris. His mental training. Because the physical work is only half the story. Chuck was a student of the warrior philosophy in the deepest possible sense. He studied not just the techniques of martial arts, but the mental frameworks that the great Asian martial traditions had developed over centuries. The concept of the prepared mind. The idea that a champion's greatest victories happen not on the competition floor, but in the training hall. In the quiet moments where discipline is chosen over comfort. He meditated. He visualized. He ran mental rehearsals of competitive situations so detailed and so specific that his nervous system couldn't distinguish between the simulation and the real event. When he stepped onto the competition floor, he had already been there 10,000 times in his mind. The outcome felt inevitable because in his mental rehearsal, it always had been. Bruce Lee, one of the greatest martial artists who ever lived, recognized what Chuck was doing and sought him out personally. The two men trained together, shared philosophies, pushed each other's understanding of what a human body could achieve. That relationship is one of the most fascinating in martial arts history. Two men who were each operating at the absolute frontier of physical and mental development, comparing notes, challenging each other, refusing to let each other settle. When Bruce Lee says someone impressed him, you listen. He said Chuck Norris impressed him. That is not a small statement. What did Chuck Norris eat to fuel all of this? Because you cannot run every morning, throw thousands of kicks, do hundreds of push-ups, and spar with elite fighters without putting serious fuel into the machine. And this is where I'm going to surprise you. Chuck was not ahead of his time in nutrition the way he was in training. He ate like a functional athlete of his era. High protein, enough carbohydrates to sustain the volume, minimal processed food, lean meats, eggs, rice, vegetables, nothing exotic, nothing engineered. He ate to perform, not to appear on a magazine cover. The irony is that his body looked cover-ready anyway, because that is what genuine athletic training actually produces when it is sustained long enough and consistently enough. The aesthetic is a byproduct of the function. He never chased the look, he chased the performance. The look followed. Now, here's what matters for you, because I know what you're thinking right now. Okay, incredible story, but I'm not a professional martial artist. I don't have 8 hours a day to train. I have a job, a family, responsibilities. I can't possibly replicate what Chuck Norris did. And you're right, you can't. But that doesn't mean you can't use his principles, because his principles are not martial arts specific. They are human performance principles that apply to any body, any goal, any training environment. Step 1. Pick your pillars. Chuck had 5. You probably need 3. Whatever your fitness goal is, building muscle, losing fat, improving endurance, getting stronger, identify the 3 things that matter most and commit to training all 3 every week without exception. Balance is not a weakness, it is a structural advantage. A body trained in multiple capacities is more resilient, more functional, and more sustainable than a body pushed in only one direction. Step 2. Systematize your volume the way Chuck did. Decide your training load before you start, not during. Write it down. Commit to it. When you're 30 minutes into a difficult session and your brain starts negotiating, the decision is already made. You don't debate with a predetermined plan, you execute it. This is the single most underrated principle in all of training, and it is what separated Chuck Norris from the people who trained almost as hard as he did. Step 3. Flexibility is not optional. 10 minutes every morning. 10 minutes every night, daily, no exceptions. The range of motion you maintain is the range of motion you keep. The range you lose is almost always lost gradually and almost never recovered without significant effort. Start now. Stay consistent. Chuck did this for his entire career, and his body reflected it. Step 4. Spar, metaphorically if not literally. Whatever your version of sparring is, do it. If you lift weights, compete occasionally. If you run, enter a race. If you do martial arts, spar. Put yourself in situations where the performance is real and the outcome matters. Nothing accelerates development like genuine stakes. Your nervous system responds to real challenge in ways it cannot respond to simulated effort. Chuck Norris built his career on real challenge. So should you. Step 5. Mental rehearsal. Spend 5 minutes before every training session visualizing the session going exactly as you want it to go. See yourself completing every rep. Feel yourself pushing through the hard parts. Hear the weight moving. This is not mysticism, it is neuroscience. The brain activates similar motor pathways during vivid visualization as during actual movement. Chuck Norris was doing this before sports psychology existed as a field. He arrived at the practice through martial arts philosophy. You can arrive at it through the front door of modern science. Either way, it works. Use it. One final thing before you take any of this and run with it. Chuck Norris won 7 World Karate Championships. He built a Hollywood career that spanned 4 decades. He founded his own martial arts system and taught it to hundreds of thousands of people. He is still training. He is still teaching. He never stopped. The discipline he built in those early morning sessions in Korea, on Air Force bases, in small martial arts schools in California, that discipline never left him because he never let it leave him. He chose it every single day. Not occasionally, not when it was convenient, every day. The lesson is not about karate. The lesson is not about Hollywood. The lesson is not even about Chuck Norris specifically. The lesson is that the body will become whatever the daily habits consistently demand of it. Chuck's habits demanded excellence. His body delivered excellence every single time. Now decide what your habits are demanding, and then go train.